Kanto. Then we head to Johto, except we did Hoenn because of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. But anyways, welcome back, Wolfpack Verlisify, and this is how to use Furret. Furret is a Pokemon that has not the greatest stats. You can just kind of look at it. We have okay speed at 90 speed, and unfortunately that is the highest stat that we have. 85 on the hit points can be good in certain situations, but overall we don't have too much on the offenses, too much on the defenses. We just got a fast little guy that might do something cool. When we look at its typing, it is a pure normal typing, so it does leave for a lot of potential. That it can have crazy movesets, crazy potential, very consistent typing at least. It doesn't have to worry about too much. So those are just kind of things that we consider. Now when we hop into Pokemon Showdown, we can see that Furret kind of wants to be a doubles Pokemon, that it does get access to Follow Me. So Follow Me makes it to where all the moves are going to hit Furret instead, and it has priority, so you can kind of use Furret as a damage sponge, as a status sponge. That can really make it to where another Pokemon on your team can really do a crazy amount of work. That if you have a Pokemon that's just kind of setting up like a Mega or anything that's trying to do outright damage, Follow Me is going to disrupt all of your opponent's plans against it, and people might not expect it from Furret. Also, Furret can support pretty well, that it does have Super Fang. Super Fang against a full health target is going to cut them down to half immediately, regardless of their defense, regardless of their hit points. That can really set up some KOs on tankier Pokemon, especially if you're trying to hit both opponents with one of your other Pokemon. And then you have Charm, so you can soften up an opponent, and Sucker Punch. Sucker Punch is nice if Furret gets in a 1v1 or just needs to throw out some damage really quick. It can have that priority. It can catch an opponent off guard, finish them off if they're at low health, and that's pretty much what Furret is going to excel at. I think that's kind of what it does best. Also, instead of Charm, Furret does get Captivate. It's kind of like Charm, except if you are the opposite gender, lowers the opponent's special attack by 2 instead of lowering their attack by 2 under any situation. Now, with Captivate, you might want to have a female Furret just because there are more Pokemon that are male generally, that there's a higher chance of having male Pokemon, and that's kind of how you can play it. It still has some luck aspect because the opponent has to be using special attacks and has to be opposite gender, so, you know, it's just going to be one of those weird things, but it is just an option that Furret gets access to. When we look at some other things, Furret in singles is going to be pretty awkward and not really strong, but you can still kind of use it to do some things. That if you invest full into hit points, invest full into defense, give it an impish nature, you can start setting up Amnesia and then kind of play a little bit of support around it. So, you know, you use Amnesia, take a hit, maybe don't get hit to half directly if they're using like some kind of setup Pokemon, and then now you just kind of wait, you know. If you can predict your Citrus Berry getting procced, then you can use Thief. Citrus Berry is going to proc, you're going to get some health back, you can steal the opponent's item, so at least you're making work happen from there, and then you can just set up a Focus Energy or Baton Pass, and that's kind of going to be the most that Furret does. That there are a lot of Pokemon that'll use Calm Mind Baton Pass, so they're at least Baton Passing more stats, but Furret can at least get some Amnesia really quick, so you use Amnesia once, Focus Energy, Baton Pass, and now the Pokemon has Focus Energy. That Focus Energy's effect can be Baton Pass, which means if they're going to be using something that gives +1 to crit, like a move or an item, now their critical hit ratio is perfect, and they're always going to be critting with a little bit of special defense. Now, if you don't want to worry about Focus Energy too much, you still have access to Hone Claws, raises the user's attack by 1. So now it's like, okay, Amnesia, Hone Claws, Baton Pass. You can give a tankier, defensive, bulky Pokemon some stats that it might be able to make use of, and that's kind of the most, while you also steal an item from an opponent. As for the ability, you know, Frisk is going to be a really nice ability. Also, Frisk is going to be really awesome in doubles, because it's going to just make you know what your opponent's items are, so you can play around it. There's no surprise. It's like, oh, he has Lumberry, not going to status him. Oh, he has a Focus Sash, maybe I should double focus it, or play around that Sash a little better. And you can kind of do the same in singles, like Frisk will at least let you know what your opponent's idea is, so that way you can like scout out a Scarf early or something, or a choice item. But with Keen Eye, I just want to mention Keen Eye, that Keen Eye as an ability, really cool, ignores their evasion stat. So Keen Eye is going to make it to where if they're spamming evasion like Minimize or Double Team, you can get around it. So Keen Eye in general is just a direct counter to evasion. I wanted to just kind of show that off a bit. Now, other things Furret can do, Furret is one of the few Pokemon that gets access to Assist. Assist makes it to where that you can use a random move known by another team member, but in 3v3 singles and doubles, and maybe even 6v6 to a degree. So what people will do is they'll make teams around this. Like you have a Focus Punch. Pretty much moves with negative priority, moves that have certain conditions to activate, won't work under Assist. So I mean, you'll have a Breloom with like Spore, Protect, and Focus Punch, and that's kind of it. Which means that it's only going to draw from that Spore. Which means that now that you can have a Furret throwing out a Spore and then using Knockoff. So it's like, you're going to try to put opponents' Pokemon to sleep while removing their item, and just being this annoying, unpredictable thing. It's like, oh, what's Furret going to do? Hey, it just put me to sleep. Hey, it just knocked me off. What? And then it can gain some health with leftovers, so then you can have Protect, something like that. Or I was even thinking if you like get really crazy, you can maybe even put Last Resort here. Now I know Furret doesn't have the highest attack, but Last Resort is going to get stabbed and have a ridiculous amount of base power. So it is, you use assist, you use knockoff. Now you can use Last Resort whenever you want, so you can just assist Last Resort or assist knockoff. And I mean, it's kind of one of those moves where you're just trying to look to force your opponent out. Now unfortunately, you know, if Furret got access to Roar, this would be just silly, because you could put an opponent's Pokemon to sleep and then roar them away. Same with Dragon Tail, but I mean, unfortunately we don't have anything crazy like that, and that would just be an interesting combo that Furret could get access to. So pretty much it's kind of like assist knockoff, then whatever. You can maybe even rest sleep talk. That way you can just rest sleep talk into spores and knockoffs and see what happens. But you do have to build a team around it, and it just can be a funny way of gimmicking out with a Furret pretty well. Now, other things that Furret gets, you can Lagging Tail Trick. That Furret is a Pokemon that has access to Trick and a lot of crazy things. So it's kind of, you see your opponent, you trick them, so you can try to do this onto a sweeper. You know, if you invest full defensive, you can endure that hit really well. Now you make it to where your opponent is always going last, because they're going to be sitting on that Lagging Tail, which means you can just, you know, throw out a Super Fang, throw out a Toxic. After you've knocked out that Pokemon, you can still have Furret carry knockoff. I wouldn't recommend knocking off the Lagging Tail. You work so hard to get onto your opponent. But overall, you know, it's one of those things where Toxic, Super Fang, that's a lot of damage, that's a lot of stall. You can at least try to shut down one of your opponent's Pokemon and at least be disruptive against other things. And that's really all that Furret is going to be capable of in, you know, singles, that it's just going to look for minor disruptions, not really heavy KOs. But it can still do some really fun things. Like I said earlier, Furret is mainly going to be a doubles Pokemon. And if we hop over to Bulbapedia really quick and kind of look, you know, Furret has a ridiculous move pool. That it has all sorts of great move tutors, you know, elemental punches. That's where we get knockoff in here and Last Resort. So we do get some really cool things, Super Fang as well. But overall, you know, it just doesn't have the stats to make it work. It has like a full special roster. Thunder, Flamethrower, Sunny Day, Hyper Beam, Blizzard. It can do whatever it wants, just doesn't have the stats to really do it. So you're going to have to be a little more tricky about it instead of just being outright crazy. But for it, there is some good potential here. There are some cool things that it does, that it can do. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. That's how you use Furret in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire.
Your life is your choice. Choose your next move at WGU.
America. 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 Welcome back, Wolfpack Brolis here, and this is how to use the Freedom Bird, known as Braviary, representing everything that America stands for. Looking at those stats, it's going to be a Pokemon that can actually knock down a good amount of damage, and we're looking at something a bit different right now. We have 100 on the base hit points, so we can actually tank up a good amount of hits. We have 123 on the attack. I don't know what that represents, but let's just say America, and that's going to be a good amount of damage, and 80 on the speed. So 80 base speed is where we start getting into a really good Scarf range, and it's also just a pretty good way to knock down some tanks. So as we saw with Bisharp and other Pokemon, you know, they like to hang below 80s. As we've seen with a lot of tanky Pokemon, they are below that, and with our 123 attack, we might be able to wall break them pretty well. So we're going to have a lot of effectiveness with the Braviary. Looking at other stats, 75 on the defense and special defense. I consider 70 like the glass range, so we're a little above that, and with our 100 hit points, we're going to be fine. Also, we get access to Brave Bird, so the 100 hit points means we can survive more recoil, so Braviary is actually going to be pretty solid of a Pokemon. Look at its typing. Well, I mean, this is a normal flying typing. So Rock, Electric, and Ice are going to be our weaknesses. We are immune to Ground and Ghost, and we resist Bug and Grass. So that's going to just be like straight up how the normal flying typing works. We've seen a lot with a lot of other Pokemon. Hopping into Pokemon Showdown. Hey, it's what I said. We're going to Choice Scarf into the Brave Bird, and then we're going to use our Bulk to try to knock down as many Pokemon as possible. So Return is going to be decent as an other coverage option move. So if we don't want to take any damage from recoil, we can still throw out a decent powered Return, maybe absorb a hit, and then 2-hit KO off of that Return. So good amount of power with that stab. Brave Bird though, it's going to be our bread and butter. 33% recoil. That's brutal, but 180 base power after the stab makes it worth it. Then we also get the superpower. So superpower, it's going to work out really well against other normal type Pokemon, and the cool thing is with our normal and flying stab, we're actually going to be resisted by Steel and Rock, so superpower can be used to really hurt those Pokemon pretty well and just have a lot of super effective damage. Then we have U-turn. So Choice Scarf on the U-turn, pretty it's just a pretty solid thing to use in a lot of situations. Come in, get free damage, go into a Pokemon that's going to resist, and then take less damage than you just dealt. So it does give us that option. It's an out that turns into damage, and we don't really have too much other coverage that really makes it worth it for us. That we have like Rock Slide and Zen Headbutt, so it's not going to be like the most insane U-turn. It does provide a little bit of bug coverage, which we might find a darker Psychic type Pokemon, so U-turn is pretty serviceable with this. Now looking at the stats, do we want 123 being boosted even more for high amounts of damage, or do we want that 80 base speed being boosted for more outspeeds? It's up to personal preference. I mean, 259 getting a Choice Scarf is going to be pretty powerful, but if we go Jolly Nature and then we become faster than almost everything, that's going to be really good as well. Not Lax, Jolly Nature. So we're going to be really powerful after that. We're going to get 50% more speed on that 284, but then with the Adamant Nature, that's a good amount of attack. So let's go and take a Pokemon like Talonflame. Talonflame is going to be a pretty low stat Pokemon by comparison, except for that speed. But 81 attack, let's say we go with that Adamant Nature, and that's going to be 287. So 287 compared to the 397 is going to be like a Life Orb Talonflame's worth of damage from that Brave Bird, minus the priority. However, since you're Scarfed, it means that you still have a lot of damage. So slightly less than the Choice Band Talonflame, but you still have the same effective speed by outspeeding everything, and then high amounts of damage to still deal with, and more hit points so you can survive better. Talonflame does have Will-O-Wisp and the fire coverage that does give it its advantages. We're not saying that Braviary is better than Talonflame, or Talonflame is always better than Braviary, just kind of comparing these Pokemon with something familiar. And Keen Eye. So Keen Eye is really cool. Keen Eye is going to make it to where if they are boosting evasion or something, it ignores their evasion stat. You can come in, hit a minimized Pokemon, hit a double team Pokemon, not really have to worry about that. So it's always good having that Keen Eye option on a team if you are someone that's really frustrated by that. Then we get Defiant. So do we want to never have to worry about evasion, or do we bring that Defiant, and then now if they have an Intimidate Pokemon, we play it up just right, we come in with +1 speed from our Choice Scarf, and then +1 attack from the Defiant, and then nothing matters. Then we Brave Bird and everything goes away. So that could work out pretty well if we do get the proper Defiant play, which also works in double battles, that, you know, we bring in Braviary, people might not know what it does. They see a Braviary like, oh, I haven't seen this thing before. It's probably bad, so I'm just going to throw out my Intimidate Pokemon. Whoops. And also you do get access to the Rock Slide, so U-turn not as insane, not as big of a deal in double battles, so we can go with the Rock Slide and then maybe find conversion off of that, you know, Talonflame isn't going to be able to one-shot us with this, and then we can Rock Slide the Talonflame, have that boosted damage on the other Pokemon, maybe they flinch, and then we also have our other secondary Pokemon that can hit that Pokemon, and boom, we win, or we get lots of cool stuff. And now we're stuck in Rock Slide, which isn't that great, but we still have like the damage options though. We hit other flying Pokemon really well with this. We can switch out, come back in, and then just Brave Bird with a +0, and that's still going to be very powerful. Or we just kind of do whatever. Braviary also does get access to the Bulk Up and Tailwind, so it can be a Tailwind support for itself or other Pokemon. Right here is our generic speed thing, that 203, well that's going to boost to 406, so we outspeed 135 base speed Pokemon at level 100, and if we drop it down to level 50, we see that we're going to be good to go as well. So Tailwind is going to be pretty solid with this, and it lets us get a lot of hit point bulk, so we can use Brave Bird and heal up a lot, and this is going to be the idea that we want to use Bulk Up. So if we're using Bulk Up, we can also sacrifice down to about 100 EVs on hit points and then boost up into Special Defense. This is going to make us effectively a little bit more tanky, because now we can survive those special attacks, go into that Roost, use the Bulk Up, go into Roost, and then Brave Bird that threat out. And then we play the Bulk Up game, so if we use it twice, we have double our attack and double our defenses, and now nothing's really hurting us too much physically, and Brave Bird is still destroying everything. As for the item, Life Orb does work, but why are we boosting damage on top of boosting damage? Life Orb is good if your plan is to Tailwind, Roost, Bulk Up, and then Brave Bird for everything. Like, that's going to be pretty good for the Life Orb, because +1 is going to be just absurd amounts of damage, but then we can also dial that back and then go, alright, what if we just have like a Citrus Berry? That's going to make it easier for us to set up a Tailwind, because we use Tailwind, say that does 60% of our health. Well, Citrus Berry, going to bring us back up pretty high, and then that means we can get a Bulk Up before we have to Roost, and then we can outpace them like that. So, depending on what we're going up against, that can work out pretty well. And then we go for 2 Bulk Ups with this set, Brave Bird everything down onto that Tailwind. Whenever Tailwind goes away, we set it back up, we Roost, and then we just Brave Bird. So this can be a pretty frustrating set. Now you will want a special defensive tank. Like, this Braviary isn't going to be a massive tank that's going to be absurdly impossible to kill. It's just there to kind of be a threat to physical Pokemon, that they have a Pokemon that's really pushing that offensive power. While you bulk up, now they do a little bit less, and then you turn it into a sweep with the Brave Bird. So you will need a special tank. You will need to make sure their special threats are either not going to hit you super effective, or they're also just kind of really weakened. That one bulk up in the Brave Bird handles that special Pokemon. Now the physical Pokemon comes in, has to already deal with your +1 bulk up. So you're going to be pretty good to go on that, and then you're doing Tailwind. If Braviary does go down, try to set it up with like 1 or 2 turns of Tailwind left. That way that next Pokemon coming in will at least have the speed advantage and can maybe push that to take out a hyper offensive Pokemon that your opponent has. So that's going to be like basic Braviary stuff. Then Defog. So interesting thing about 5th generation Pokemon. Flying types get a natural defog, which is going to be usable in the 6th generation because of the Kalos rules, that it has to be like born in the 6th generation. Now Pokemon, or a lot of Pokemon before that, they got it through TM. They got defog in the 4th generation through a TM, so they didn't get it through any other learn set, and few Pokemon got it as an egg move. So mostly Braviary is going to be a really reliable 6th generation. Now there are other Pokemon from earlier generations like Caesar that can get defog and some other exceptions to this, but if you want Braviary as a defog Pokemon, it can work out pretty well. I don't know what you would really get rid of, like take out the Tailwind and put in defog instead. Flying types with the defog is a little tricky though, because you have to come in, take that rocks, then defog, then roost, and pray you don't die. So it can work, like you just take off Tailwind, you put in defog, you play it from behind, but you also clear all the entry hazards. So get rid of those entry hazards for your other Pokemon that can really work better without them. Maybe bulk up into a Brave Bird, try to cheese out a KO with that. So you just cleared your opponent's setup, and then you also scored a KO, and that's going to be a very effective Braviary if you ask me. So that's going to be how you use Braviary. It has some pretty cool stuff. Anti-evasion. We didn't really talk about sheer force that much, but it doesn't have too many things that benefit from the sheer force. It's a nice idea, but it doesn't really work with Brave Bird or anything, so there's really no point. And then Defiant for doubles or singles trickery. So if you guys enjoyed the video, that's how you use Braviary, and I hope you all have a nice day. God bless America.